put the recording on right now. And then I was going to do something else too. Show video panel. Show. All right, here we go. There we go. There we go. There we go. There we go. I'm going to put that right there. I'm going to minimize this, get that out of the way. Okay, there we go. Now, all right. So we're set. Everybody's good. Okay, here we're going to get started. So I'm Allan Vyhnalek. I work for Nebraska Extension for at least another month. Then I retire. So that's where I'm at with this whole process. I'm giving it up. So I'm trying to get my phone to tell me what. Okay, I'm going to make sure I have all my stuff shut off. I do. All right. That's how you get a hold of me. That's my email address. That's my phone number. And also,
don't worry about me. I'll just get what I can.
what's wrong, Randy? What's happening, Randy? What do we need?
We were just having a hard time hearing, so I was adjusting it. But I think we're okay.
All right. Am I coming through loud enough?
You could be a little louder if you want to, but it's not bad.
All right. Okay. Well, I'll put it just a little chair closer, and then we'll kind of go from there. Okay. Yeah, I'm running off my computer and I don't have an official microphone, so that probably screws that up a little bit, but hopefully you'll hear me all right. So just know that you can email me. If you call me, there's a lot of days I'm not in the office. Today I am, oddly enough, but most days I'm not. And so just leave a message. I'll get back to you as soon as I can, because it comes to me via email, no matter where I'm at on the road. So that works. And then my web page is, if you have somebody that misses this, I'll try and post this have this posted on the web page after we get done. They can watch the whole talk, or my other talks are up there too. Also, there's a workshop coming up on March 7th, next Tuesday, at Lancaster County in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I'm sharing that workshop with Brandon Dirksnyder. He's a farm succession coordinator and a farm, he's also a financial planner. He does a nice job of explaining stuff, the technical stuff that I don't get to. And then also on the 14th of March, and another week after that, I'm doing this same workshop with Brandon at the Cass County office. And I know that the March 7th workshop at the Lancaster office is going to be recorded. So that might be a good one to have to look at too. So there's opportunities to get this information to other people if you'd like to share it. So today is not about, we're trying to get you some goals put together and some motivation put together to get an estate plan put together, because the anecdotal data I get from ag professionals says that just a little over half of farmers don't have an up-to-date estate plan. So less than half have an up-to-date estate plan. A little more than half either don't have a plan at all, or it's not up to date. So I know that I have a job to do here to get everybody up to date, get everybody going with what's going on here, and get up. And if you listen to what I have to say, I'm going to work it out that you have, you can make better use of your professional's time. And if I save you time with a lawyer, let's say I save you an hour, you could pretty well pay for your afternoon to be here, because an hour with a lawyer is going to cost $300 to $500, $250 to $500. And so if I've saved you an hour because of what we heard today, that's how I'm going to make you some money today, or help save some expenses today.
Hey, Al.
Yeah.
Just slow down your talking a little bit. You're talking a little fast.
I'm going too fast.
Yeah, just slow down a little bit. Okay.
Well, that's a common problem. I always go too fast. So let's put it that way. All right, so we'll slow it down just a little bit. All right, let's go on. So the first question becomes, in my mind, are farmers or ranchers ever plan to retire? Here's the latest data I have. 18%, 19% said they plan to never retire. Another 52% they only plan to say they plan to semi-retire. That's about 70% of farmers never plan to retire in Iowa. That's the latest data I have. But guess what? It's the same for Nebraska. It's the same for anywhere else in the country, because the boomer generation, who's primarily out there on the farm banging away still, or ranch for that matter, is old, and we're getting older, and we don't ever want to quit. We don't ever plan to quit. And so there's the issue. That becomes the issue that I want to talk about here at the beginning. The bottom line is boomers never quit because it's work first and family second. And so for the younger generations, it's family first and work second. And so it's an interesting situation to think about. So we really never plan to quit. And so I just wanted to make that point. and I don't have data for Nebraska that's up to date, but it's very similar to this. Well over half never plan to fully get out of farming. Why not? Because they have a difficult time giving up control. And for a boomer, control's huge. Look, for a lot of us, we took years and years to have control. So why am I going to give it up now, even though I'm of retirement age? Let's say, for instance, let me give you the example what I'm thinking about when I have that comment up there. We're going to make that comment. What if I was the farmer? What if I farmed? And what if my mother-in-law, father-in-law had the land? My dad-in-law's been gone for a while, but my mother-in-law just passed away last June 2nd. So if I took over her ground on June 3rd, I've had control of that ground for what, less than a year, probably only 9 months, approximately, maybe 8 months. So why would I give up control now? Even though I'm turning 68 in May, why would I give control yet? That just doesn't seem like it's a good idea. That just seems dumb. So control's a huge issue, especially for the boomers. That was work first, family second. Modern equipment allows them to go longer. On the farming side, the GPS and auto steering and all that stuff allows you to be in the field longer, go further, and do better work almost. It looks prettier anyway. They don't want to think about retiring because that means that they're thinking about death, and so they don't want to think about that at all. I don't know about the cannot afford to retire. This is from a survey that I did about 5.5 years ago now. And I don't know if that's true or not. I think for some eastern Nebraska farmers, there have been a couple of years of really good prices. And so I don't know if that's exactly 100% true. Although when I made that comment about the good prices a couple of weeks ago in McCook, they all told me, one guy pulled me aside and said, yeah, I understand the prices have been better, but not here in Southwest Nebraska where we've had drought, because even though we have a better price, we're not selling anything. So there's a kind of a catch-22 on that. And then just over half don't have a successor and still don't know what else they do. And that's probably why I'm hanging on to almost 68 years old, because I don't know what else I do. I don't. All we did is work. I don't hunt or fish. I never picked up those habits. I don't want to go to the bar and drink. I don't want to go to the bar and play cards all day. That just doesn't sound very appealing to me. I don't mind playing cards once in a while, but not all day, every day. I don't go to the coffee shop in the morning because I don't even drink coffee. I don't know what else I do. And to be true, I grew up on a farm, but my farmer carpentry skills are farmer carpentry skills, and that wouldn't be good enough for being inside the house. So I'm not sure what else I do, but I'll figure it out soon enough because April 7th is coming. I'm not trying to embarrass anybody, but let's separate the two things happening here. I'm not trying to embarrass anyone thinking about retirement. That's a separate issue. Knock yourself out, stay on the horse, stay on the tractor as long as you want to. Because you're not going to retire anyway, so I'm not even going to deal with you on that. You want to work, keep working. If you feel like working, work. You're not hurting my feelings at all. But here's why I'm giving this talk, and here's why this talk's important. No one has been able to figure out how to avoid the pine box. What happens to your stuff when you're gone? We haven't been able to avoid the great demise. And so the question becomes, if we want to leave a legacy, what are we going to do with our stuff to make sure that legacy is fulfilled? That's the issue. And so please understand that. And please understand that I'm not trying to embarrass anyone and think they have to retire. I'm just trying to get you to understand that you need to think about what happens to your stuff if you want to give that some thought ahead of time. Because more often than not, planning tends to be deferred until some critical life event occurs, which forces the family to address the matter. Okay, so we wait until here's how I interpret that. We wait till somebody dies, and now we're going to have a conversation about what happens to our stuff. That's a terrible time because we're all sad and sorrowful. I mean, we're going through that grief cycle. And with the grief cycle, there's a period of disbelief. There's a period of sorrow, sadness. There's a period of anger, disbelief, anger, sadness. And then eventually you get into kind of an acceptance mode, but then you can go back around and start that cycle again. And so you have families in different stages of that cycle, usually every 15 minutes, right after there's been a death. And so it's a terrible time to have the family get together and talk about all this. So let's have conversations about what happens to our stuff before somebody passes away, or somebody gets cancer, or somebody has an accident, or somebody has an aneurysm or a heart attack. Let's have those conversations ahead of time while everybody's still in good health, so we can figure out what to do, what's going to happen, what's next. We don't plan, it's complicated, we don't think about it, it's mental work. And to be true, the process of our brain only works about so fast. And if you go talk to the wrong lawyer that's giving you all the legalese and giving you all the stuff, he's talking to you sometimes, in some cases, about a mile a minute. He's going like this. But your brain can only process about so fast. I mean, I remember talking with the one lawyer where he was already on point 3, and I just had figured out what point 1 was, what he was saying with these legalese, with all his conversation. And so then I had no idea what point number 2 was, because I didn't catch that. So if you have a lawyer that's doing that to you, either tell him to slow down or go find a different lawyer. Lawyers are available. You don't have to put up with one doesn't want to communicate with you properly or at your speed. And I think sometimes, I talked about the death part. Okay, I think that sometimes we're afraid that if we put together a plan today, that if I live for another 3, 5, 7 years, 10 years, there'll be something wrong with the plan because, well, somebody will die. There'll be another grandbaby born or great grandbaby born. They will buy a piece of ground, we'll sell a piece of ground, we'll buy cattle, we'll sell cattle. Something will be wrong with my plan if I put it together today. And guess what? That's true. But I would submit this, and I've checked with lawyers and bankers and everybody else agrees with me. And here's what I submit. I submit that it's far cheaper to change the plan than it is not to have one. Because you can change a plan for 800 to thousands, just a little over $1,000 probably. Not having a plan could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions. So please have a plan, and please understand that that's cheaper, and changing that plan because something changed with your family is cheaper than not having a plan. So here, kind of the planning has to get done. At the end of any career, there's 3 types of planning that has to go on. Number 1 is that we have the end of life documents, those plans and those things like that. That includes the power. Okay, so the end of life documents, what I'm talking about there is I'm in a hospital, I can no longer, or I'm not able to answer for myself, or I'm in a memory care unit, I cannot answer for myself. And so who's going to handle the power of attorney for my health care? To meet with the medical people to determine what happens to me next or doesn't happen to me next. Who's going to take care of my bills? That's the personal power of attorney, personal issues, personal matters, or it's called a durable power of attorney. Who's going to take care of that stuff? Okay, who's in charge of that? It could be the same person, but it doesn't have to be. And then do I want to write a healthcare directive, or sometimes it's called a living will? Do I want to do that or not? That's up to you. You know, that's everybody's choice and how they want that to look and what they want to have in place right there. The thing I would say about these matters and those 3 forms, those 3 ideas, is that everybody over 18 needs that. All your kids need that too. All your grandkids need that too. Anybody over 18 needs that. Because I've heard stories of 19, 20, 21-year-olds going off to college, having a car wreck on the way home, end up in the hospital. Parents are good parents. They rush to the hospital, help the hospital staff with what's happening with their child, and the hospital staff won't talk to them because they don't have that power of attorney done for healthcare. So the bottom line is, have that done, because if you don't have it done, now you got a 19-year-old in the hospital and you got to go help him, he or she. You got to go petition a court and with a lawyer. And you have to have the judge deem your child as incapable or incompetent to handle, to take care of themselves. They have to condemn them. And then so you become the guardian, and then you can work with the hospital on what's going on because you don't have the power of attorney put in place. And that's an expensive process, way more expensive than just having the power of attorney form filled out and be done with it. The second circle is in the lower left-hand corner of that handout or on the screen. And it's the estate plan. Those are just the documents that make your stuff move. When you're gone, here's how things move. Here's my things in place to make sure that moves. I'm not too worried about that. Most people kind of understand what they got to have put in place there. The third part of it, however, the lower right-hand corner, the business succession planning part, I think that's where agriculture fails. If we're lucky enough to have somebody come back to that farm or ranch, what plans do I put in place to make sure that business succeeds? And so if we do to our children what our parents did to us 30 years ago, 40 years ago, we will lose another operation out there. So please understand that. Here's what I think about when I say this. What did our parents do to us? Our parents said, I'm one of 4 kids. I want to be the farmer. I'm on the farm. And then when the parents pass away or when they step aside, guess what? I get 1/4 because our parents felt that equal had to be fair and fair had to be equal. Okay. So that's a problem in my view. Please think through that very carefully. If we want the business to succeed, we have to do better than 25% for each child. Because with 25% down, I can't go get a loan to buy the other brothers and sisters out. I can't. But with 25% down, Dr. Shane Farrell at Oklahoma State did a Monte Carlo simulation, economic simulation on this, and you have a 1% chance of making it, 1% of going on. So please understand, if you want your business to succeed, you have to have different plans in place than fair is equal and equal is fair. Number one, I would say if you got a kid on the farm that's putting a sweat equity into this, he probably should get more than fair or equal. Number two, if you have a kid on the farm, you can put into other structures in place to make sure that they get their part of that farming operation in a very so they can continue on. So here's my point. I could put together long-term leases that say that the other brothers and sisters have to lease to my on-farm kid after I'm gone. I could put together land contracts that say that the brothers and sisters have to sell that on-farm kid, maybe even for a discount after I'm gone. Or I could put together first right of refusal agreements. I could do some things, some structures like that to make sure that business can succeed. We keep that asset base together so that business can succeed. I would submit to you to think carefully about the sweat equity part of this thing, the sweat equity. So what's your goal? Is my goal to give my estate equal because equals fair? Or is my goal to make sure the business succeeds? If that's true, then maybe the on-farm SIB, boy or girl, whatever that looks like, gets a different share of the operation to give them credit for their sweat equity they put into this thing for 10, 20, 30 years. The best thing I heard was from Western Kansas and Western Nebraska, where I heard estate planners out there talk about that they gave 1% of the asset to the on-farm kid for every year they were out there. So if I'm out there for 20 years and I'm that on-farm kid, I should get 20% right off the top, and then we take the other 80% and we still divide it by 4. So the on-farm kid gets 40% of the operation, the other ones get 20% of the operations. But if the other people think about that, they get 20 instead of 25. That to me isn't a deal breaker. To me, that shouldn't be a deal breaker. So I'm not telling you how to do this. I'm just saying that if you got more than 3 kids and you make it equal with an on-farm child or on-ranch child, you're in great peril of putting them out of business. So don't think fair should be equal and equal should be fair. Do it if you want the business. If your main objective is to have the business succeed, plan it so the business succeeds. All right, where am I at here? Right here, hang on. What I find, however, is that people get stuck in what I call Al's circle of inaction. I should have a plan. Good. I should go to a meeting or meet with a lawyer. That's what you're doing right now. We're in a meeting. We're having a issue. As I talk here, this is the meeting. And then all of a sudden, wow, this is complicated. I have a headache. And so you automatically get to and stop at step number 4. Take no action at this time because you don't want to think about it. This happens all the time. How do I know about the circle of inaction? It happened to me too. So I've been giving this talk for about 15 years already. And for the first 5 years I was giving this talk, I realized I needed to change my will. I needed to change my plan. I needed to change my effort. Because my original will when I first got married, that I call it the I love you will, says, honey, I love you. If I'm all gone, all my stuff goes to you. And hers says, honey, I love you. And if I'm gone, all the stuff comes to me. And the third thing that I love you will talks about is if we're lucky enough to have children, here's who I want to be the guardians, A, B, C, D. They take care of our kids if we're both gone. Here's who we want to do that. And so now that you have assets, or now that you want to make sure your business succeeds, make sure that you change that original I love you will to include how you're going to make sure the business succeeds, how you're going to make sure that everybody gets what you want them to get, those kind of things. That takes more planning than just that original I love you will. And so that's what I think about when I talk about this. So I think about it more sequentially. I think about step number one. What do you have? Write down the inventory. And I've got some slides that kind of back this up. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this right now. But listen, if I write down what I have, I've just saved a whole bunch of money. You've just paid yourself for being here this afternoon. And I know that Randy didn't charge your registration, but you just paid yourself for being here this afternoon. Because listen, if you don't have stuff written down before you go see a lawyer, what's the lawyer going to do? The lawyer will take out a little pad of paper like this. He'll go, oh, you want an estate plan? I'll help you with that. What do you have? And if you can't provide it for them, then they're going to say, oh, you have land? How much land do you have? And you'll just start writing it down on a pad of paper. And how much your tractors and what's your horses and what's your machinery and what's your livestock? And he starts writing and writing and writing. And guess what happens? The whole time he's writing and recording your inventory for you, which you could have had done, he's charging you what? $3 to $5 a minute. So if you just have that simple step done before you go see him, you will have saved yourself a whole bunch of money. Just have that done. Secondly, step two, family meets, gets input, who's in and who's out. In other words, after we get the listing of stuff available, that inventory available, then we go to the family and say, who's interested in the piece of ground up against the Platte River on the bottom there? Who's interested in that section of grass that's up in the sand hills? Or who's interested in having grandma's yellow pie plate that came over from Germany, or Czech, Vyhnalek is Czech, that sort of thing? Who's interested in that? So we have to understand that we need to have that family get together, and I'll talk more about this in a minute. But the main thing you want with that family to get together is to understand that this is not about decision making. This should be about gathering input. Everybody should have a chance because they're part of the family to give input, but the decision making is going to be made by step number 3. So ideally, here's our plan. So the matriarch, patriarch, mom and dad, grandpa and grandma, whoever's in charge gets to make the decision, because in estate planning, the golden rule applies. The golden rule is not what I hear in church: do unto others as others do it. It's not that golden rule. The golden rule for estate planning is, ye who have the gold, make the rule. Okay, it's just that simple. So if that's grandpa, grandma, mom, and dad, whoever it is, they do it. If that's grandpa and grandma and their children, they do it. Everybody else is out. So the family meetings for hearing everybody's input, the decision making is ideally, here's our plan. And that includes, in utopia, what would I like to see happen to my stuff? In my perfect world, what happens to my stuff? And then step 4, then go see the lawyer. And the lawyer will take your utopia, your perfect world on your estate plan, and put the right tools in place to make that happen. So understand that's when that should happen. That's when you think about whether I use a trust, or I'm going to use an LLC, or I'm just going to use a simple will. And do I want to have probate, or do I not want to have probate? That's a discussion you deal with your lawyer. And then the last step is succession. Now, the last action step is succession plan, develop, sign, congratulations. And then after that, then you review and amend or change your stuff as something happens or as something changes. Those are the steps. I'll talk about each of them just a little bit more later, but I wanted to take you through and get you to understand kind of how this is all going to put together. So the main part of this first part of the lesson is about ready to conclude. The main part is we have to understand that please have a plan. No plan or not communicating a plan, having no plan or not telling someone about the plan leads to chaos in many situations. Chaos causes greed, and greed will split families. Okay. Here on the next video, we have 2 monkeys side by side. If they had to perform a task, you'll see what that is. And then if they performed a task and they received the same thing, in this case, it was a piece of cucumber, they were happy to do their task and receive their something to eat all day long. Then they changed the experiment and gave the second monkey a piece of grape instead of a cucumber. And let's see how they behave, because they didn't tell the monkeys this was going to happen. I think this is interesting. Whoops. We'll do it this way. Okay, here we go.
See what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. So he gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again.
The point is, if we don't show the children what's going to happen, or we have no plan for what's going to happen, somebody will get greedy. Somebody will get dollar signs in their eyes, and they will block the whole family. They'll screw the whole thing up. I'm not being critical of them necessarily, but I am kind of, because here I'm going to tell you about a phone call I had. Phone call September 21. Farmer calls me up, asks me some estate planning questions. I answered the questions. He said, Allan, you have to hear the rest of my story. My sister's taken me to court. I said, what happened? He said, I didn't talk to my mom and dad. They did what they wanted to, but they really felt that equal wasn't fair and fair wasn't equal, and that they made plans for me to get the part of the assets to make sure my operation could continue as a farming operation. But they didn't tell my sister. As a matter of fact, I don't think they even told me. I think he said that they didn't tell him either. They just didn't say, because they didn't want to be the bad guy. So they didn't share the information. Sister gets these dollar signs in her eyes because half of a $10 million estate is $5 million. But my brother should cash me out for $5 million. That's worth a lot to me. I need that. Well, if she gets $5 million of cash or whatever, he can't afford to do that, or he's an operation. And his parents saw that, so they said, no, we're not going to do that. And I don't even know if it's a $10 million estate. I'm just using a number out of the air there. But the point is, she didn't like it when he got a bigger share in her view, because that's what the parents had planned. And she took him to court, suing, saying that he had undue influence on the parents because he was an on-farm kid. We have to do better than that, because who wins when you get taken to court for an issue like that? The lawyers. Okay, understand that. You said lawyers or thought lawyers, you're right. Who's not going to have Christmas, Easter, or any of the family functions together, like weddings and funerals? Who's never getting together for any of those things again? That family, that brother and sister, and their families. So you split things wide open. I think we have to do better than that, in my view. Okay, hang on. Come on, go on. Okay, there we go. So maybe the first conversation we have regarding estate plan is, when we're done with this estate plan, will we still have a family? Let's not make that assumption. Let's get that commitment. Let's get people to understand that they have to put aside their jealousy and their greed and their feelings of unevenness, and it's family first. If we get everybody commit to that, that makes a big difference, I think. It changes all the mentalities. And secondly, don't even start to plan, do nothing until you know that mom and dad, grandpa and grandma are on the same page. Because I've heard of situations where grandpa told a son, this is the way I think this ought to happen, and grandma told a daughter, this is how I think it ought to happen. Now we've taken the disagreement across the two generations, and that's never good. So make sure that don't start anything until the older generation, people with the gold, know what's going to happen, or know how that's going to go together. Okay, or how they want to proceed. So going back to that step number one, what do you have? Get a list of your assets, inventory, investments, everything. A good place to use, good thing to use if you don't have your own form, is to use the Iowa State Ag Decision Maker file C4-57. It's an estate planning questionnaire. It's so well done, there was no reason for me to recreate this. I just refer people to this document, this publication. If you just do a search for Ag Decision Maker, and then just type in C4-57, you should be able to find it relatively quickly. And it's a great tool to get you started on writing down everything you have. Okay. Family meeting. Depends on the family. Maybe you should probably, I recommend a family meeting. Some people won't even consider it. Most lawyers don't advise it, but I think it's interesting because I think that as a son-in-law that just had my mother-in-law pass away last year, I felt it was important to include people like me in a family meeting, because how did I feel like I was a part of that family? I felt like I was a part of that family if I was allowed to give input. So find out let the family get together and give input. no decision making, and find out who's interested in what. Who's interested in farming? Let's find that out first. Who's not interested in farming? Who's interested in you know, any of those things? So that's what I consider. And here's the way I think about it. You have to plan this carefully to avoid disaster. Meaning, who's there? Mom and dad, grandpa, grandma, obviously. Their sons, daughters, sons, daughters, sons, daughters. And then that's usually where lawyers will say, stop. Don't ever have spouses there. I think spouses should be there because I think spouses sometimes ask all the great questions. So make sure that the spouses are there so they can ask those questions instead of just going back home after the meeting's over and then quizzing the brother or the sister on what happened. What'd you do? Why'd you say that? Or what's going on with that? So let's be careful about that. And the other thing is, I think that sometimes some older grandkids, or I shouldn't say older, I should say the grandkids that can handle the discussion, they could be 15, 16 and handle the discussion just fine. And I know the 20, 21-year-old grandkids that can't handle that discussion, they shouldn't be there. You got the right grandkid there, especially those interested in ag. I think I'd have them there to listen in too. And then also to make sure this meeting doesn't implode, the meeting just doesn't go to heck in a handbasket. You consider ground rules like saying if somebody has an idea on what ought to happen, there's no criticizing ideas. We're just allowing people to have input. Input means you know, like just saying, hey, I think this, and I think this, and I think this, and we don't criticize anything. Secondly, sometimes you'll have that person that wants to jump in and talk all the time. They're always talking, they're always making a comment. You might have to institute a gag rule on that person saying, hey, we're talking about that section of grass up in the hills. Everybody gets a chance to talk once before anybody gets a chance to talk the second time. So don't allow people to take over conversations. Just make sure you gag it so that everybody has a chance to give input. And you make sure you call on everybody when you're talking about that section of grass to make sure that everybody has a chance to participate. You say, hey, you know, hey, Jerry, you didn't say anything about that section. Or what do you think ought to happen? We want your input too. Get everybody involved as best you can. So after the decision, after the input meeting's done, then the family has to make a decision. And for that, you're using the golden rule. You have the golden how to make the rule. In some cases, just mom, dad, grandpa, and grandma. In some cases, mom, dad, grandpa, grandma, and their children. But it's never usually any deeper than that, which is why I have everybody else X'd out. The spouses are X'd out and the grandkids are X'd out because this meeting's about decision. Make sure make sure that you have clear ground rules in place for this meeting. Make sure somebody's taking notes. Make sure that you understand whether it's going to be a unanimous vote or a majority vote, and make sure you know that who's going to break the vote is mom and dad or grandpa and grandma. I think that would be important. You know, make sure that you have a tiebreaker if there's an even number of people in the room. So decision making then is done, and what you're doing there is you're coming up with your perfect plan. This is what I want to see happen to my stuff. After I'm gone, this is the legacy I want to leave. And then you get that written down, and you get this, give instructions, you know, for the future generations exactly what you want to do. And you may be keeping it, you may be selling it, you may be gifting it, you may be transfer on death, payable on death. Sometimes you don't care what happens to different things, but just make sure you write down what you want to have happen. So what did you want to do with that? And that's all part of that legacy thing. Or what plans do you have in place to make sure that farming operation continues? And then you go see your ag professional and they make your dreams happen. Obviously, everybody pretty much needs to work with a lawyer, because the lawyer will write the documents then to make these things happen that you want to have happen. Here's my point. Between step 3 and step 4, a lot of people just get hung up. They stop because they can't go on to step 4. I don't want to talk to my lawyer yet because I don't know if I'm asking him to do a trust or an LLC. That's the main question I get. Well, Allan, do I use a trust or an LLC? I'm going, no. You know what you want to have happen. Here's in your perfect world. This is what happens. This is what I want to have happen to my stuff. And so you take it to the lawyer and you trust them to make the right decision on how that's going to work for you and how they get put together for you. And if you don't like the way the lawyer put the package together, go find a different lawyer. It costs you a few $100, but it's cheaper than having an estate plan you hate. You have to use some of these other professionals in this meeting, or excuse me, in this part here. And as a matter of fact, I'd probably get them together all in one e-meeting or effort. And here's my point. There are certain instances where a financial planner becomes important because if I have extra cash at the end of a year, maybe I don't have to buy another piece of machinery to get my taxes lower. Maybe I go see a financial planner and there's a way to shelter some of that money into tax deferred investments that allow me to spread my taxes over more years, especially as I get older. Maybe I should consider using a certified farm transition specialist to be the coach, to help me coach me through getting my plan put together and help coach work with the lawyers and these other people to make this all happen. Maybe, obviously, we have to keep the ag banker happy. We have to make sure they get paid off. And then we have to make sure that the insurance person could be involved, especially if you're young enough to consider insurance products like life insurance products to help fund some of the changes that are going to take place. In other words, I've heard of situations where the on-farm kid, boy or girl, will buy a second to die life insurance policy on their parents. So when the second parent passes away, that amount of cash is generated. And then they use that pile of cash, $500,000, $1 million, whatever that happens to be, to fund, help them fund getting the other kids out of the business, or help them take care of their share of the assets so that you don't lose land to make that happen. And I don't know how that fits in everybody's situation, but it's just something to consider, especially if you're a little bit younger. And then you have to make sure your CPA or tax preparation person is involved, because you can make some horrible mistakes with how you get this planned and have a big tax load at the end. The other thing I want to point out is that if you're ending your operation, if your operation is going to be done, don't make the mistake of not planning for that. Meaning that you don't make the mistake of working on that if you're ending an operation, 3 to 5 years to end the operation is what you should be considering. I bet you there's been one guy I work with, his name is Brandon Dirkstander. He's a certified farm transition specialist. He said this in a meeting recently, I had a farmer that just up and quit in September, said, I'm doing my last harvest, this is it, I'm done. He became the IRS and government's best friend, because he was selling he sold last year's crops and took the income in this year. He prepaid all of his crop input prices for this year. He has this year's crops coming on. He's got his machinery sale coming on all this year. And so his tax bracket now, all told, is going to be in the 50th percentile tax bracket for him, because he has so much money as income. All that capital gain, machinery sales, all that income, grain sales from 2 years, no expenses to go against it per se. He becomes a tax. That's a tax load nobody should have to bear. You have to unravel that 3 to 5 years in advance. Now, if you're lucky enough to have a successor and go on to the next generation, that's more of an 8 to 10 year cycle. Quite honestly, you better be thinking about that well in advance, so that you can make sure you have things in place to make sure the next generation can continue. I'll talk more about that yet too. So my summary of all this is to say that let's avoid that circle of inaction. Don't worry about the tool you're going to use. Let the professional figure that out. In other words, don't worry whether it's a trust or an LLC or a will or a combination of those. Let the professional figure that out. And if you have somebody on your team that's hard to work with or hard to understand, go find somebody that explains it to you at your speed, at your language, and just get rid of them and find somebody else. That's cheaper in the long run. I just guarantee it. Yeah, you're not going to be happy because you pay 2 people to do the same thing, but you'll be overall happier because you have your work done properly, the way you want it done. Okay, now I think I'll go ahead and do this part and then we'll take a break, because I'm not going to make you sit and listen to me that long, and I don't want to talk that long. But here's what I want to talk about. We have to make some, if you're making a transition on to the next generation, we have to give some consideration to both the older generation and the younger generation, and talk about what the steps are for that transfer, or some things to how I'd proceed through that transfer. I'll cover that quick and then we'll take a break. Not quick, but I'll cover it. For the older generation, if you're going to transition to the next generation and the older generation is going to start stepping away, how are we going to make sure that the older generation has enough cash to do what they need to do? Like, for instance, I'm in the middle of making applications for Medicare Part B, as in boy, and I've already got a Medicare Part D coverage in place, and I got to get my Social Security applied for, and all this sort of thing has to happen as I'm stepping away here in a month. And so all that stuff well, by the way, to supplement, I'm meeting with an insurance person tomorrow to set up a Medicare supplement insurance policy, because I've been told that's what you need a supplement. And so the point is that needs some cash. Also, as you start to, as the older generation, if they're like my parents, are going to put off all the travel, all the things they want to go see until they retire, then you need some cash to make that happen too, or other activities that you want to take on to make that all happen. And it's going to happen to my wife and I too, for that matter. I think you also have to discuss very carefully where people are going to live. I remember I was talking, if you haven't figured it out, I like to tell stories to illustrate the point I'm trying to make. I'm not trying to tell stories to make myself sound more important, because I'm retiring in a month. I don't care. But I'm telling stories to illustrate what I'm trying to talk about. So I'm sitting down with one farm family here in eastern Nebraska, and it's mom and dad in the room, and then the son and the daughter-in-law in the room. So it's 4 of them in the room plus me. And we're talking about how this is all going to play out, and the daughter-in-law felt brave because I was there to buffer the parents. She didn't know what reaction she was going to get from her mother and father-in-law, but she was brave because I was there, and she said, "Listen, what do you," to the parents? She goes, "What could we? My husband and I get an acre here attached to the farmstead, so we could build our own house and have our own place right here in the farmstead, because we'll move out here and leave our town jobs and come take over the farming operation." And the mother-in-law immediately, the older generation immediately goes, "Yes, of course, we'd be happy to have you. We'd be absolutely happy to have you do that. But that's never our plan. Our plan was we were going to buy a house in town, and we were going to move into town, and our son and now your daughter-in-law could come live out here. You just take over on our place. You don't have to build a house." And then it gets kind of uncomfortable in the room. And I couldn't figure out why everybody was kind of hedging their bet and not wanting to say what they wanted to say. But then after a couple of minutes, I figured it out. At the end of the day, mom and dad's old 2-story frame house with no heat or air conditioning upstairs, where they had 2 little girls, where the girls would have to sleep, wasn't good enough for daughter-in-law. Daughter-in-law wanted her own place that had heat and air conditioning in every room. And who could blame her? But it didn't come out right away, and I couldn't figure out what was happening. And all of a sudden went, "Oh, I get it. The old house isn't good enough for her." And so they've worked hard in town. They're moving in, and they're in their late 30s, early 40s, and so they're moving in kind of relatively late in life, actually, out to the farm. They probably have some cash to make something like that happen, or be willing to go into debt to make that happen. So their residence has to be discussed. Make sure that's part of your conversation. And then the older generation has to figure out how they're going to treat the non-farm or non-business areas. Is it going to be equal or fair contribution and compensation? At the end of the day, I'm railing hard on you to understand that fair isn't equal and equal is not fair, especially if you have an on-farm kid coming back. But at the end of the day, it's still those parents' decision on what they want to do. There's no rules or laws on this, because the golden rule applies. You have the goal to make the rule. There's no laws to say you have to do something. I'm just making an appeal on the emotional side to say, hey, consider doing something to make sure that if you want that operation to succeed, you do something to make sure the operation succeeds. The younger generation, what do they need for their lifestyle? Understand that the younger generation will have some lifestyle choices that older generations won't necessarily agree with, especially our parents. My parents' generation, especially them, they're going away relatively quickly. They're passing away at a very high rate, but if they're not already gone, they won't understand that most families, younger families especially, have to spend between $150 and $400, and most of the time it's between $300 and $400 a month on electronics, the cell phone, the wireless, the Hulu, the Zulu, the old entertainment stuff, dish, whatever it happens to be, wireless in the house. Tablets, do you have a tablet or not? And it does, you're going to get that hooked up, all those kind of things, all the electronic stuff, including cell phones, mobile phones, all that sort of thing. You're going to spend a ton of money, and a lot of people don't necessarily understand that if they're older. The younger generation has to work about how they're going to grow their business, how they're going to handle their debt, how they're going to handle rentership, owning and renting versus ownership. But the last thing I want to talk about here is this last part. The older generation values work. I already hammered that into you pretty hard, but the younger generation doesn't. It's family first. So I remember talking to another family in eastern Nebraska where I was talking with the mom and dad in the house, and they said, well, we got 2 boys back to the operation. The older son is out there. He got a bunch of his own ground, and he comes and helps us once in a while, but he's kind of on his own. The younger son was working at a farm machinery dealership, And so because he wanted to become involved in farming. So to get him in, because we didn't have enough acres to just bring him on, we hired him to be our mechanic because he had that experience, farm machinery dealership. He's a tech. So they hired the younger son to come, and so he caught some acres. He's doing some farming. He's helping mom and dad farm, and these folks were in their mid-70s, but they're still out there on the farm banging away. And the boy that now is working for them, while he wasn't married, everything was great because he would go do his own farming on nights and weekends and whenever. Okay, but now he got married, and then guess what happens after you get married? They had a baby. Now that you've got married, you've got a baby. Guess what? His wife says, "Wait a minute, you need to see your child. So on nights and weekends, I kind of expect you to be around here some." And so what was he doing? He was sneaking off during the day to do his farming, 8 to 5, and his parents were paying him. And so that was rubbing on the parents the wrong way. They were getting angry about that, getting frustrated about that. I don't know how that issue got resolved. I have no idea. But the point is, we better figure out this family time versus work thing and make sure that we get over the idea that for the older generations, work first, family second. For the younger generation, it's family first, work second. Neither one of them are wrong. Neither one of them are right. But figure out how your family's going to deal with that, because that's an important thing. So there's phases that we have to go through. The first phase is testing. Was the next generation coming back to the farm willing to help with all the tasks? And that's an interesting thing to think about. You would think that they'd automatically be willing to do all this stuff. But I had one farmer, a different guy, talked to here in eastern Nebraska, sitting in his kitchen. He goes, "I got this boy that's working a town job. He kind of wants to come back, but he wants to come back to drive the tractor with the GPS on it. I don't need him for that. Farming's finally fun. I want to do that." So he said, "I don't need him to drive the tractor. I want to take care of that. I need him to crawl to the top of the barn to paint. I need him to go get on his knees and work on whatever that's low because my knees hurt. And then, my back hurts from all the dairying we did over the years and pig work we did over the years. I need him to go do fence. I need him to scoop manure. Okay. I need him to do all that hard work." And so that's a conversation that needs to be had. And we have to make sure that younger generation is willing to test out to do all the tasks other than just getting to do the fun ones. The second phase, by the way, a lot of people, if they're on the ranch or on the farm right now, they've passed this with flying colors. That's not really usually an issue. So when you bring somebody in, that's what you have to make sure you go through the testing phase. Management transfer has to be planned. What I mean there is, if I just put my kid, if I'm lucky enough to have a kid to come back to Operation Ranch or Farm, and I put him on the end of a business end of fencing pliers or put him on the business end of a pitchfork and never let him off there, never give him an opportunity, how long are they going to stay with no management and be in charge of something? They're not. And they shouldn't. And by the way, they shouldn't stay. But and by the way, we can make the opposite mistake. We have to give them some responsibility. You can't just let them work all their life. That's not going to work. But we also have to think about the opposite part. What if I have a kid that comes down to university or goes to Wyoming or wherever, Kent State, gets a big degree, comes back, can handle the operation according to his degree? So I say, okay, fine, take over. You're in charge. Just make your own decisions. I can guarantee you within 2 hours of that comment or that conversation, you're going to end up being mad at each other because the older generation says, "Well, that's a dumb decision you just made." And the younger generation is going to say, "Wait a minute, you told me I was in charge." So make sure you don't do either one of those mistakes. Just let them work or to put them in charge of everything. You have to do it planned, the management transfer, very carefully planned with timing, meaning you have to say, okay, you're in charge of that section of grass, and that you decide what the stocking rate is, and you decide how the weed management goes, and you decide what cows go there, and you decide what bulls go there, and you decide all that stuff. That's yours. Or you're in charge of this quarter that has a pivot on it. That's your pivot. You decide how it's going to get planted, when it's going to get planted, what the planting rate is. You market the crop, and let's compare notes and see how those things went, and see if you're profitable or not, and what your profitability compares to the dad's operation. You have to have records to prove that you did good or didn't do good, because I think that has to be done slowly, not all at once. Because how do we learn? We learn by making mistakes. How are we going to make mistakes? Put them in charge of something. You don't question or don't stop them from doing what they've decided to do. Let them do it. Let them make the mistake. Let something go wrong. Because how are they going to learn? We all learned not by being successful. We all learned by making mistakes. So the management transfer has to be done slowly, planned, and you don't give them enough to sink to operation, but you give them enough so they can cut their teeth and learn something. That has to be thought through very carefully. Because if I'm out on a ranch or farm for 50 years and I've never had any so Randy, it takes me back to that famous story we heard from Dave Gaylor. Okay. Dave Gaylor, the guy that had a disposition basically before I did, says he had a 62-year-old guy come up to him. And a 62-year-old guy comes up to me and says, when is it appropriate to give management responsibilities over to your son? And Dave goes, how old's your son? He said, well, my son's 40, but I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about my 92-year-old father. Okay. So I love that story because, we need to do better than wait until we're 92 to try and turn over management. How are we going to get the next generation to learn if we don't let them be in charge of something? But we don't give them everything at once. Okay. Livestock or machinery transfer, I call it the asset or enterprise transfer. For livestock, if the next generation is really helping with calving, and with the nights, weekends, blizzards, all that, then they should get a percentage of calf crop or something like that could be worked out. That's all I'm saying. You can come up with a plan there. Let them sell the culls or let them do this or let them, you got a way to get some stuff transferred. Say, start building your own herd. On the crop or livestock side, make sure you take advantage of the gift tax exclusion each year. And up to $17,000 per person could be transferred or gifted per year. That's the new 2023 rate. And so what I mean by that is I can gift Randy up to $17,000 worth of assets, livestock or machinery in a calendar year. And by the way, since I'm married, my wife can gift Randy up to $17,000, $34,000 per couple to one. Randy's married, so I could give his wife 17. My wife could give his wife 17. We could go up to 68,000, no questions asked. Just write, document it, and have it done. The only thing I'll suggest is that you go check this out or clear this with your CPA. If you're giving away machinery or gifting machinery, two things. Number one, the people receiving the machinery probably have a zero basis because that's probably what your basis is. And secondly, make sure that you're not incurring a capital gains by giving away that machinery to that next generation. You just have to think that through a little bit. That's all I'm saying. Okay, and then the last part is the whole farm or business or farmland transfer. Given the current tax laws, the land will probably pass at the death or the demise of the current owner. The way this is working. Well, I'll give you my example. For instance, I own farm ground. I own farm ground in Saline County, right here, but just south of Dorchester, southwest of Crete. And my brother farms it. What if my brother calls me later this afternoon and says, hey, I'm not going to farm anymore. I really don't want to have to worry about who's going to farm my farm ground, so maybe I'll just sell it, right? But given the current tax laws, I'm probably not going to do that. Why? Because when did I get that ground from my mom and dad? I got it in 1990. What was it worth? About $1,000 an acre. I'm not using exact numbers. I'm just giving you an example. Now they tell me it's worth $5,000 an acre. Was $1,000? That was my basis. And now it's worth $5,000. And IRS is going to say you sold it for $5,000. That means you owe us some money on capital gains. Capital gains is what I sold it for minus my basis. $5,000 minus my basis, $1,000. So my capital gains is $4,000 an acre. In my current tax bracket, I'm going to pay 25% or $1,000 an acre to IRS because I sold the ground and took a capital gains. So people in that situation either will sell the ground and then take the cash and go do a 1031 exchange, or you just simply won't sell because when I pass, it looks farms in a trust. I'm the trustee now. It goes to my children. One lives in Omaha, one lives in Ames, Iowa. And what does their basis become? Their basis becomes the value of the ground at the day I pass away. So if it's worth $5,000 when I pass away, they sell the ground, which I've told them they're welcome to do that, and they sell it for $5,000. Their capital gains is $0. That's why most ground's going to transfer at death. Okay, it works for most trusts, most corporations, most LLCs, but the only thing it doesn't work for is a subchapter S. A subchapter S. If you have land in a subchapter S, know that there's generations that pass. The basis does not change. The corporation keeps that at that original basis. That's why a lot of people are getting rid of subchapter S's and trying to get it transferred out. Go see an attorney yesterday to get that worked on because it's a 5-year out. Okay. Now, some people call me, oh, just 3 weeks ago, Randy, I had a phone call from a lady that's probably about our age. And she said, my mom and dad are out on the farm right now, but they're going to have to go to a nursing home soon or assisted living soon. And then to the nursing home when they get in worse shape. And they're all excited. They're in the mid 80s, 85, 86 years old. And they're all excited that they're worried to death that the nursing home is going to get their farm. So they want to gift it to me and my sister right now. There's 2 kids in the family. They want to gift it away right now. What do we do? Can that be done? Yeah, sure, it can be done. You can gift anytime you want to. And you can use your lifetime exclusion from the IRS, which I'll talk about later, to make that gift happen and not have to pay much for tax or anything. But be careful, because if I gift it to my kids right now, and I end up in a nursing home and I run out of cash and end up applying for Medicaid anytime within 5 years, because it's a 5-year look back, that grant can get pulled back in and still be used to pay for the nursing home. So at 85, 86 years old, they're making a bet that they're going to live another 5 years. I don't know if I take that bet or not if I'm the daughter. Second, well, first of all, you wait until 85 to decide what's going to happen with that is just not very bright. You have to get that done well in advance. And by the way, it could be called nursing home insurance. You should probably consider that if you're really worried about not having the nursing home take away your farm or asset. It's called nursing home insurance. You have to pay somewhere along the way, and so you might have to pay nursing home insurance. That's up to each family. Everybody can figure out what their situation is. But the other problem with giving it away is that I'm taking a chance that whoever I give it to, my son and my daughter and their spouses, that one of them won't have creditor problems, because if they have creditor problems, they're going to come back and grab that ground to pay the bill, right? Because you still could lose the ground. And you have no control at that point in time. My son or daughter could get divorced. It happens daily, pretty much. And so if somebody gets divorced, guess what happens? You lose a quarter of that ground. 2 kids who lose a quarter of that ground to that person that has the asset, the ex-spouse, or and of course the other problem is they don't. Oh, by the way, if I gift it, they don't get the increase in basis. If I gift it, their basis is still, let's say, at that $1,000. So now if they want to sell, they have to sell for 5 and they get cambered on capital gains. So just understand there's 3 issues that come with gifting farm ground. And the chief one, in my view, is just as important is the whole not increasing your basis thing. That's the one that kind of catches people. So have all this done with written plans, include exit plans. Use job descriptions if you have, especially if you have more than 2 children involved or 2 people involved in the operation, and you knowing that you still help each other with all the tasks, but you put one person in charge of the crop side, one person in charge of the livestock side, or one person in charge of marketing, one person in charge of breeding. You can define who's really in charge of what, so they can make the call. But everybody, it's time to go. If it's time to go brand cattle, everybody's got to go help. But one person's going to be in charge of the cow herd at that particular pasture, that sort of thing. So make sure you have all those things thought out. Okay, this is a great place to take a break. I know that I need to stand up and stretch. So Randy, is it okay if we take 5 minutes? Are you okay with that? He says thumbs up. So please take a break, and we'll come back here and stand up, move around, don't sit. And we'll come back here in about 5 minutes at about 10 after 2. And by the way, are there any questions here? Did anybody say anything? Congratulations in advance. Okay, all right, very good. We can hear you very well here. Good. I'm glad to hear that. All right. If you have other questions, you can throw them in the chat, or we'll unmute you at some point in time, and we'll make you live so you can ask your questions. That'll be just great. I got to figure out if can I pause my recording? Hang on, I'm not sure. I have to remember to turn it back on. Okay, I started that back up. It's 10 after. Are we okay to start? Think we're okay to start? Okay, here we go. All right, I talked about this screen, so we're going to go on. But first of all, are there any questions? I mean, you could put them in chat, or you can unmute yourself and talk. Okay, we'll go on. We'll ask questions at the end, maybe. I can stop the recording then while you're not on recording. I probably would like that, right? Okay, so here we go. Parents, I've discovered doing this for a number of years now that parents make assumptions that don't always turn out to be the right assumptions. One thing is our business only does not get shared with anyone. That's an assumption made by Vyhnalek, but Vyhnalek, if I had my name tag on, that would be Czech. Or there's Germans, or there's Polish, or there's Swedes, all those ethnicities in Nebraska that came here. It's something our parents installed on us. Our generation is our business, and our business only. And it does not get shared with anyone. So the story I have to tell here is I did get this phone call about 10 years ago in my office in Columbus when I was still in Platte County. And the bottom line was, lady calls me up and says, Allan, I have questions. I said, okay, well, how can I help? She said, well, I have to, my mother's been put into a nursing home and she's in a memory care unit. And so she can no longer answer for herself. I have the power of attorney for the durable power of attorney for her business affairs. So I have to work with the tenant on the lease arrangements. How do I do that? What do I do? And so I said, well, you get the written lease out and you go talk to the tenant. And she said, Allan, that's the problem. There was no written lease. And so that's always a sticky wicket. I mean, first of all, let's have a written lease. But second of all, what are the parents thinking? The parents are thinking that old value that we don't share our information with anyone. It's our business and our business alone. You know, my second question to her was, what did your mom tell you about the lease? What did your mom tell you about managing the farm ground? And she said, that was just it. My mom was a stubborn German that didn't think she had to share anything with anyone. So she didn't even tell me about the lease. I'm not saying that any tenant would take advantage of that situation, but I'm saying very clearly that we put our kids sometimes in really uncomfortable situations because they don't know. Because it's a written lease or written document about your plans is not for you or your generation or even your parents' generation, because we shook hands and our word was our bond. It's for the next generations after we're gone. That's why we should have all this in place. Okay, my kids get along great now. I know that will continue even after I'm gone. The longer I do this, the longer I think that the parents are the glue that holds those families together. Parents hold those families together. When the parents are gone, then that glue tends to go away. And I know this from my own situation because my mother-in-law, as I told you, passed away last June. And my wife and I tried to have her family together at Thanksgiving. We didn't get everybody to come because they just, had other things that they were going to do. I'm not mad at them. I'm not upset. But I'm disappointed because they didn't follow the whole idea that, with the glue thing. It just didn't work. Point number 3, I know my children want to keep this asset in the family even when we're gone. That's very utopic. That's very wild, but it isn't always true. I'm working with a family of sisters. They had quite a sizable land holding in Northeast Nebraska. And 2 sisters lived in Lincoln. 1 sister lived in California. And we're having a meeting via Zoom. And the sisters in Lincoln say, we want to keep the ground. We'll be happy with the rent check off that ground. It'll be a nice income to supplement Social Security or whatever. The sister in California goes, well, I'm a little younger, and boy, houses in California are expensive. I'm still getting a kid graduating from high school. I got another kid getting married, and I'm going to go on vacation. I could use some cash. Is she wrong? No. But what we do that's wrong in that situation is we tend to give the ground to the kids via tenants in common, which means that those 3 kids owe each 1/3 of every acre, 1/3 of every acre. And that to me is a bit of a mistake because then they can't really manage it themselves. And so to manage their own acres themselves, because at the end of the day, the sister in California could get a lawyer to petition a judge and have the land sold. So each get 1/3 of the money. Nobody's going to get left out there, but they didn't do what the parents wished, which was to keep the farm in the family. In my view, parents would do better if they could give each kid their own piece of ground if they're lucky enough to have that much. And then you even it out with the other assets that are there, household contents, those kind of things, and to make it equal. And if you can't make it equal, then you say the kid that had the land that was worth more than the kid that didn't have the land, worth less. If it's a $50,000 gap, then you have to, the kid that has more should give half that gap to the kid that has less in terms of land value. So that'd be 25,000. Do you make them pay it all at once? No, I wouldn't. I'd say 25. I'd write it down that if the difference is 50,000, you pay half, 25, and you make it over the next 10 years. Because the kid with more land should be able to pay $2,500 in payments to the kid with less valued land, something like that. The fourth bullet says I don't have to worry about a will. I'll be gone. I don't care what happens to the ground. Kids will figure out how to deal with it. If you want to start World War III with your family, go with that. The fifth bullet says since I have 4 children, my assets have to be divided equally, 25%. That's the only fair way to do it. I already talked about that. And then the last bullet says, someday, son or daughter, this will all be yours. That's what a farmer told me once at Husker Harvest Days. He said, my dad said, this would all be mine. But I'm one of 4 kids. And guess what? We just got done reading the will. My mom just passed away this year. We got done reading the will. What does the will say? It has to be given equally because equal is fair. So he's been there for 50 years. This guy was 67 years old. He's been there for 50 years. And 50 years. And now he reads the will and he gets 25%. First of all, do we recognize any sweat equity for this guy at all? I would say not. He got the same as his brothers and sisters that weren't on the farm. So I would just say this. If you want to recognize sweat equity, you have to do better than equal because equal is not fair in that situation. And so that's what goes back to that, 1% for every year they're out there. Something to consider. The bottom line on someday, son or daughter, this will all be yours is, unless that's notarized or some plan behind it, it's just simply not true. Okay, the big key to this is communication. But usually when we have a problem, and Randy knows from my background that I taught ag land management, and now I'm teaching succession. Actually, I still do the land management stuff with Jim. I do the succession stuff kind of on my own. And so between land management and succession, I'm kind of covering a lot of farm management here. When we have a problem between landlords and tenants or between family members on estate plans, nearly always it's because either bad communication or no communication, no other reason. So communication's key. Family members have to decide how they're going to communicate with each other. It's not necessarily email or not necessarily messenger. It's not electronics. It's how we're going to talk. And the key to that is listening. The key is listening. It's not to say what you wanted to say. The key is to listen to what the other person's saying. Randy, can you unmute and play along with me for a second? Is that a possibility? I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't realize you had to go back up to the computer.
Yep,
There
we're
you go.
on.
Okay. All right, Randy, play along with me for a second. Okay, so Randy, let's see, this is already Thursday. What are your plans for Saturday?
Maybe go to a bull sale.
Go to where? Bull?
To a bull sale in Broken Bow.
Okay, very good. And so, yeah, that sounds more fun than my plans for Saturday, Randy. Mindy's, my and Mindy's last uncle passed away this week on Tuesday morning, and so we're going to Omaha on Saturday for the funeral, memorial service, basically. It's kind of a cool dude because he donated his body to science. His body's going to go to UNMC to be studied and used as a cadaver for those students, and that's kind of a cool effort on his part. But we're going to go to his memorial service on Saturday, and you know what? It shouldn't be that depressing. I think that they want to make it more of a pure celebration of life because he was a funny dude. He told all kinds of stories. He's always joking. And so I think it should be kind of fun to see some of Mindy's, my wife's cousins, and those people that we haven't seen very often, and celebrate the uncle's passing. All right. So Randy, why did I ask you the question about what you're doing Saturday? Not to hear, I didn't do it to listen to what he had to say. I did it so I could talk about me. All right. So that's not listening. That's not communicating. Randy, let's try again. You can stick with the same answer. You can change. I don't care. So what are your plans for Saturday? What do you hope to do?
Go to the ranch.
Oh, really? Where's the ranch at? Tell people where that's at.
So it's between Dunning and Halsey there by the turkey farm. Have you ever been by on Highway 2 there?
How close did that fire come to you last year?
It was, it stayed west of us about 3 miles, 4.
Oh, that's all, just 3 or 4 miles?
Yeah, I would guess, yes, by the crow flies, probably 4 miles.
Okay,
It stayed on the west side of the Purdom Road.
yeah,
We're on-
okay. Okay, got it. So, where did that fire jump Highway 2? I drove through there and I couldn't figure it out.
So it jumped there by Sealy's, right before you get to Halsey there. But it jumped like it went about 10 miles or well, actually a mile or two before it landed and started on fire. So there's no,
Oh, that's why you can't see it on the north side of the highway. Okay, I get it. And so Randy, who's on the ranch right now? Is it your brother?
yeah, so I have 2 brothers. Yeah, one's on my grandpa's place and one's on my mom and dad's place. And
All right,
I'm-
so how do you help? Or do you just go visit or do you help them?
I actually help him feed cows and move cows and stuff, but more so the one brother because he runs some of my cows.
All right, so folks, did you hear that? What did I say about what I was doing on Saturday? Randy, you can mute now, thank you. But what did I say about what I was doing on Saturday? I said nothing. What did I continue to do? Ask more questions. Repeating what I thought I heard him say and ask him another question about something, just coming up with another idea. Because we have to learn to appreciate what the other person's saying, but we can have a meaningful conversation with them about what they think ought to happen to an estate plan or even a land rental agreement. We have to get them to understand we care about them as a person and we appreciate what they're saying and we acknowledge what they're saying and we have some knowledge of what they're talking about so we can ask another question. I hope that Randy, I hope you felt like I heard what you said and asked you more questions. Give me a thumbs up. Yeah, thanks very much. All right. So you never talk about what you're going to say. Make sure that you ask clarifying questions. That's how you communicate because you're going to ask questions. We have to make sure we communicate with the non-local family. I mean, I'm talking with one family once and the father goes, well, I got 2 boys interested in the farm. And I think you convinced me I need to have a family meeting. So I'm going to bring them back and their spouses back and the 6 of us, him and his wife and the 2 kids and their spouses, 6 of them are going to have a family meeting. I said, wait a minute. I said, what about the boy that lives in Milwaukee? Well, he's not going to farm. I don't care. I don't have to have him here. And I'm going, no, bad answer. You don't necessarily make him drive back to Milwaukee for a family meeting about what's going to happen to the farm. But you put him on speakerphone or you put him on Zoom or do something to make sure he's included. Because I hear story after story about somebody that says, well, I don't know what deal my dad made with my on-farm brother. I don't know what my dad did with my on-farm sister. That was all different 40 years ago when I left the farm. And so they get confused, they've never been told what's going to happen, and then they get mad. And then that's where you get these lawsuits starting to occur. So make sure this non-farm family know what's going on. Surprises cause problems, and they kind of revert back to that sweetheart deal. Okay, let me explain to you my famous sweetheart deal story. True story. Family in Northeast Nebraska is 4 kids, and this happened in about 2010, about 12 years ago, 13 years ago now. The 4 kids are getting together after their parents had both passed. One of the kids was on the farm, and so he was the farmer. And these other 3 were sitting down with him to work out what's going to happen with the lease next year. They didn't want to sell. They were going to just take their share of the lease, and the on-farm kid was going to pay them lease money. To be true, in 2010, ground in that area of the state was maxing out at about $300 an acre. It should at least been $250, $270, probably closer to $300 if you looked at the current market prices. And it'd be higher than that if you looked at what was being said at their coffee shop. So they're sitting down with their brother, having a conversation about rent. Well, we're willing to rent to you next year. What do you think you'd like to have for rent? Or excuse me, they asked, the first question was, what did you pay mom and dad for rent last year? They want to know where they were at. And the farmer looks at him and says, I paid mom and dad $65 an acre. Okay. Now understand, that's the sweetheart deal. That is the sweetheart deal. Okay. And so a lot of people will react to that very negatively and start taking that conversation down a very backwards path and want to try and charge for back rent and a whole bunch of hocus pocus that just isn't the correct way to handle it. What they needed to do is ask that on-farm kid more questions. So here's the questions I would be thinking about in that situation, because that is the definition of a sweetheart deal. And so $65 an acre when you should be paying around 275 or 300 is wow, that just makes my head spin. So here's what I would like to have asked. Who's paying the property tax on that farm? Because the property tax load at that time was at least 75, maybe $85 an acre. I'll bet the on-farm kid did. There's a pivot out there. So who took care of all the fixing on the pivot and putting on new tires and all that stuff that normally some of that would be transferred to the landowners? Who probably took care of all of it? That on-farm kid. Who made that pivot go all the way around? Who took a bulldozer out there and knocked down the fences and knocked down the hills so the pivot could go all the way around, or paid for that to happen? The on-farm kid did. There was a house on that place, and that's where the kid lived. That's where the farm kid lived now. And so who took care of putting on a new roof and new siding and new windows and rocked the driveway? All things that I would consider to be a landowner expense. That on-farm kid did. Because he knew he was getting a good deal. And by the way, who was around all the time that mom and dad had to go from the farm to assisted living, to the nursing home, to the hospice, and all the end-of-life trips to the doctors and all those kind of things? And who took care of that? Well, that on-farm kid and his spouse. So at the end of the day, what's to say that $65 an acre wasn't plenty? I never got a chance to ask those questions, but I'm just betting that I'm right on the answer. And I'm betting we should not assume that a sweetheart deal is a bad deal. Let's just make sure we stop and ask the questions so we know for sure what's going on. And then younger generations require better communication than what we received, and they deserve to be treated better than what we were treated. That's just kind of I think I've been running that theme the whole time here. So communication mistakes. Number one here is the first bullet is what I did with Randy. I ask a question not to find out what they will say, but I say what I wanted to say. Number two, make an assumption with someone else to say. Randy knows from being an county extension officer, you get messages sometimes that say, call Joe. He asks a question about ABC. You get Joe on the line and you start asking him questions to figure out what he really needs to know. It's not ABC at all. It's about XYZ or GHI or something else. I mean, it's just not even the same. So you have to make sure you listen and figure that out what they're really wanting to know. And we think about how we respond while the other person's talking. I wanted to say, Randy, how come you didn't ask me about the bull sale in Broken Bow? Or talk to me about that, but I didn't say a word. I just kept going. I went with what he gave me. So I tried to stifle that. And I'm not judging what's being said. I listen to understand. I don't think, well, that's dumb, blah, 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 blah. I have to make sure that maybe I have to ask the question, what caused you to say that way? Why do you make that decision instead of attacking that decision? I'm not going to judge it. I just want to know more about what they're doing, what they're thinking. And then the last one is trying to fix an issue without being asked to fix an issue. This is the one that I make a mistake on all the time when it comes to my wife and my children. And for my wife and my children, I want to be a good husband, and I want to be a good dad. And so if they start talking to me about an issue they've got, problems they've had, I automatically want to try and fix it for them. Until I'm learning now, finally, at fairly old age, that I shouldn't try and fix it. I should just let them talk. If they ask me to fix it, then I will jump in and fix it. But until they ask me to, I should keep quiet. And here's the video to prove what I'm talking about when I talk about this issue. It's short.
It's just, there's all this pressure, and sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless, and I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. All of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. If you would just
Don't.
Try to see things my way.
So again, just don't try to fix the issue until they're being asked to fix the issue, because sometimes all they want to do is complain. All they want to do is bellyache. All they want to do is get it off their chest. And so when, especially somebody really close to you wants to do that, you just kind of let it come. They haven't asked you to fix it, just let it go by. Hit the wall on the other side of the room and let it fall. Don't take it personally. Don't try and interact. Just let them talk. And then if they ask you, Al, what do you think? Then I'll go, okay, here's what I think. But until they ask, I try and do my best to stay out of it. I'm not perfect at this. I'm far from perfect, but I'm trying hard. So don't try and fix an issue without being asked, especially when you're talking about your close loved ones. Okay, the other thing I want to talk about quick is the difficult personalities. I mean, these are people that I look at them as the old Czech guys, the old German guys, and the old Polish guys that just don't talk much. They just want to work. That's what they were there for. And so you get them pinned down. Okay, so hey, Joe, what do you think about the estate plan? And they're the ones that'll kind of just grump, and they'll turn around and walk away and go back to work. Okay. My business is my business only, and that's their generational value, and they don't want to talk to you. Well, they don't want to give them control, so they think that if you're going to have a succession plan in place, they have to retire and not be in control, so they don't want to think about that. They don't want to think about deaths. They're not avoiding all thoughts about deaths, which includes how to give up the farm or how to leave a legacy, which is a mistake. And and sometimes I think they don't feel appreciated by other family members. And I think there's other reasons why, but here's kind of some of the key ones in my view. And if they don't feel like anybody's ever listened to them for 50 years, why would they start talking now and talk about what they want to have for the succession plan? So I think we have to be careful about the difficult personalities. And so I'm trying to come up with better strategies to deal with that. One of them is the basic one is you just got to figure out how you're going to increase communication. And so you have to make them feel appreciated. You have to listen to them. And if you still can't get through to them and get them to talk about something else anything else to begin with. And 15 or 20 years ago, you get them to start talking about the Huskers, because everybody knew about the Huskers in Nebraska at that time. And now the Huskers are so bad that it's a non-starter for communication, because most people the apathy is rich. Most people have checked out on the Huskers. Sometimes I feel sad about that, but that was always a conversation starter, not true anymore. So now you're stuck with the weather, or you're stuck about local politics, or stuck about local whatever's happening in your town, that sort of thing. Did you see that Susie had 20 rebounds in that basketball game she played last Friday? That was amazing. Start talking about something like that. So anyway, that's what you have to figure out. How are you going to get this conversation started? Or if you still can't get through to them, maybe you find a kingmaker that the king will listen to, meaning that they anointed themselves the king. They don't want to talk to anybody. So you have to find out who can break them down. Is it the pastor? Is it the bag banker? Is it their friend at the coffee shop? Is it the spouse? Who can get through to them? And you can maybe try and work that angle. Or sometimes you just have to be blunt and say, hey, listen, Dad, it's either A or B. What do you think? And if they don't like that, then maybe they'll go and, well, it should be CD and just, here's what I think. And then you've broken them down, you get to have a conversation. But you have to figure out how you're going to get through to them, and be sure that you think about the kingmaker part. How do you get, who will they listen to? I want to throw in a little bit about negotiation, because I think it's just a really important topic. I'm not talking about negotiation with the used car salesman or used tractor salesman. That's the upper left. I'm not talking about the grandkids in the upper right. That's we're talking about, I want a candy bar, I want a candy bar. So if you're going to be nice grandpa or mean grandpa, I'm talking about the family down at the bottom, because that's what we're talking about here. How are we going to negotiate with family? That's what we should be talking about. Negotiation is just a back and forth process to reach an agreement when you have both shared and opposed views. How are we going to negotiate? And we have to understand that most of us have been taught to negotiate the way my dad taught me how to negotiate. Okay. So we got a tractor here that we're going to negotiate for. It's a used tractor. And I go to the dealership, and I go to the salesman, sit in his office, and you shoot the breeze within 15, 20 minutes. What do you need for that tractor? And the salesman will go, well, I want 50,000. You go, well, yeah, well, that's nice. But to tell you what, today, I'll let you have 40. I'll give you 40 for it. And now another half hour, 45 minutes goes by, and the salesman goes, well, you've been a loyal customer. I've enjoyed working with you. I'll let you have that tractor for 48. And then you come back and say, well, yeah, I've enjoyed working with you too. I'll give you 42. And then the salesman says, after another half hour goes by, now you negotiate some more. You got to beat them over the head, work them over harder. And then the salesman goes, I got to go talk to some people. There's a guy out in the lot I should talk to. There's a guy out down the road here I need to talk to about a piece of equipment. And so I tell you what, I got to get going, but right now I'll let you have 46. And you go, well, I got to go too, because I got, or you would start the conversation and go, well, I got to go too, because I got to go feed cattle, or I got to go do some bedding, or I got to go make sure the water is cleared. I got to make sure this is covered. I got calving started. I got to go check cows before it gets dark. I got to go now. I'll give you 44. And then after another 20 minutes or so, you split the difference at 45. The bottom line is that's how we were taught to negotiate by our parents, because my dad taught me that I had to win. Now, it doesn't matter that if the salesman knew that my dad was coming, he would jack the price up 5,000. You know, we don't know what kind of games they're playing there for sure. But you know, just think about that. But if we employ, here's my point. If we employ the same if we employ the same tactics with family members, and we have somebody feel like they won and other family members feels like they lose, how's that going to feel? That's a terrible idea. We have to get beyond winning and losing in negotiation. We have to think about how we're going to create win-win. We have to get outside the box. We have to get creative. We have to think about this very carefully. And so what I talk about here is, or I want to talk about here is just to give the idea that how are we going to get beyond that? And so let's say that I was going to rent a pasture, right? And somebody says, I'm a young farmer, I'm a young rancher, I got cows, I need to rent a pasture. And so I go see a landowner and I say, hey, I can rent your pasture. What do you need for your pasture? And he goes, I need $60 a pair. And I go, or $300 a season for the pair. And I go, listen, landowner, I'm very interested in renting your pasture, but I can only afford $250. But here's what I can do. I can only afford $250 for the summer, but here's what I can do. I can, on top of that $250, I'm going to make sure that all the yucca plants are kind of controlled. I'm going to make sure that there's any volunteer trees that are controlled. Normally, you have a decent pasture fence, and normally you help supply some of the fencing or wire for that pasture fence. But I'm telling you what, I'll take care of it all. I'll make sure the fence is up tight and all that sort of thing. I'll take care of that. And I'll make sure we don't overgraze, and I'll make sure that everything's handled rightly. I'm going to make sure that all the waters are working properly, all the wells are working properly, and we're not going to overgraze this thing. I will manage your pasture right. Can you please let me have it for $50 or $250 total? And that's how we create more value. Hopefully the landowner would say, yeah, let's make a deal on this, or come up with some kind of counter proposal. You have to think out of the box. You have to get creative. My favorite story on this is an actual true story. Family comes to me, a young family comes to me, they're in their early 30s, and they have two small children, they're on the farm. They took the father of this family, young family, took over for his grandfather. His dad went to town. His dad was an only child, so his dad had owned, now the grandparents are gone, his dad owned the farm. Dad's getting to be like my age, ready to retire, and so dad's trying to come up with a succession plan for his two boys. One of them was on the farm, one of them lived in town. And as it turns out, it was a really small farm, northeast Nebraska. And the father's wealth in town, his property in town, his vehicles, the household contents, insurance policies, all that sort of thing, was worth roughly the same as the farm was. Because it was a small farm, the farm family felt like I couldn't give up anything to my brother on rent or anything like that, because I wouldn't afford to be able to be out here. We want to kind of have that ourselves. And since all this asset in town's worth about the same, why don't we just say, brother, you keep the stuff in town, I'll keep the farm, and we're even, we're equal out. And the brother wouldn't agree to that. I said, well, why not? He said, well, the brother came to him and said, I'm not giving up the farm, my half of the farm, because I want to be able to go hunt. I'm not helping you with farming. I don't care about farming, but I want to hunt because I know that place. I know where to set up the stands. I know where the deer are going to come through. I love hunting. I want to be able to hunt. And so I said, wait a minute. I proposed, I met with this couple. I said, here's what I propose. I propose that you get the farm. I propose that your brother gets all these other assets, but then you put one more thing in the deal. You give your brother a hunting easement for the rest of his life. So you can hunt out there for the rest of his life, and you can put that as part of the document, that the easement, put that in the document. And nobody, even if you had to sell the place or didn't own the place anymore, he'd still have the right to go hunt there. And usually, Randy, you know this, when you give advice like that or find out about stuff like that, you tell them what you think and then they go away and you never talk to them again. Well, I got lucky. I ran into the wife here 3 or 4 months back. And so I got to say, hey, so tell me what happened with that deal. I really want to know. Did that work to give him the hunting easement? And she said, well, not exactly, but you know what? We created more value a different way. I said, what'd you do? Well, there on the farm, the 300 acres, there's about 30 acres of woods, just nothing but trees. It's part of the pasture, but it's a very worthless part of the pasture for us because there's hardly anything to grow underneath the trees. And so, but the brother said he'd be willing just to have that deeded off to him. That would be his part of it. And we'd get some of the in-town assets, cash or whatever it is to make it even. And so the brother was going to be happy to go with that. We don't hardly give up any income at all. We still get to graze that pasture, even though it's kind of worthless, and he still gets to hunt. So how cool is this that they came up with their own creative way to get out of that and to make that work and still be a family? That was key. I thought that was cool. Okay, onward. 2 other things I wanted to talk about quickly. And I want to talk about the bottom one first. Difference in perception of contribution between siblings. I don't know how to write this more cleanly, but this is what I talk about, or this is what I'm thinking about. The on-farm kid or on-ranch kid thinks that his contribution towards that family's farm and ranch with his dad over a number of years has been 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. I come back here and we rock technology, we rock this, we've done this, we've done this. It's all been wonderful. We've done some really good things out here because of my help and my help to get this thing expanded, or my part in bringing in some genetics or whatever. Off-farm kids will recognize little Johnny's sweat equity. They'll recognize that he was, oh yeah, Johnny worked out there. He worked out hard with mom and dad. But they'll also say, little Johnny rode mom and dad's coattails. He was never the brains of the operation. Parents were. So they'll rate his contribution at 4, 5, or 6 out of 10, not 8, 9, 10 out of 10. They'll give him credit for his sweat equity, but they won't give him credit for what he brought to that operation. That's a difference in perception of contribution between siblings. I'm not saying that I have the solution to that. I'm just saying that it absolutely exists. And we better as a family recognize that difference in perception of contribution exists and figure out how we're going to cross that chasm, because it could be a huge issue if you don't get that discussed, at least at some level. I'm not saying who's right. I'm not saying who's wrong. I'm not taking sides here. I'm just telling you there's a gap there in what people think that they contributed. The other idea is the top idea. And so I think that all of us have to recognize that if we want rural Nebraska to remain strong, we have to have what we have to think about what our responsibility is. Bo Pelini said it best. I know he's a failed football coach here, but he said it best when he said, you look in the mirror and you point the thumb. What am I going to do? That's what you do. Okay. So I'm going to talk about my farm and my story about 2 versus 7 children. I think you'll understand what I'm trying to say here. I already told you that my farm's, I know I haven't told you maybe yet, but my farm's in a trust. I'm the trustee. When I'm gone, it goes to my children. So it go to Omaha, half it goes to Omaha. That's where my son lives. Half goes to Ames, Iowa. That's where my daughter lives. What part of the cash asset of that farm then, I've already told them they could sell. What part of the cash asset of that farm sale ends up in rural Nebraska? Well, probably nothing. So we made a commitment to say we want to support a local community. We want to support a local church. We want to support local. We want to support rural, because I think that the only way rural Nebraska survives is if it takes care of itself. That means all of us that have a stake in rural Nebraska should be willing to put up something to make sure that rural Nebraska succeeds. So I told my wife, I said, we got 2 children, but I think we better have 7. And I did this when we were in our late 50s. She didn't think that was very funny. And so the bottom line is, I said, here's my thought on that. 3/7 of our estate should go to our son, 3/7 of our estate should go to our daughter, and 1/7 should go to Nebraska. So we kind of figured out what our estate was worth. And I went to my retirement accounts and I designated a percentage of the retirement account to go to Nebraska 4-H, to a local community, and to a local church, because that's how I wanted to support rural Nebraska. You can all make your decision, do what you want to. You have the gold, I don't. You figure out how you want to deal with it. But I'm just telling you, if we want rural Nebraska to be strong, how are we going to contribute? And so that's the way we decided to do it. Okay, what else do I got here? Oh, okay, a little bit on the taxes. The taxes are huge, and taxes have to be considered, and taxes have to be figured out. You have to know what you're doing with your taxes. Okay, so here's the point on taxes. Estate tax. Whoops, go back here. Estate tax. Okay. The exemption right now is $12.92 million in 2023, or $25.84 million per couple. As long as my farm operation is worth less than $26 million, I do not have to worry about federal estate tax. A lot of people will fall in the category not having to worry about that. However, the state tax is set to sunset on January 1st to 26th if Congress doesn't make any action on that. It gets sunsetted back to what it was when current tax law was put in place. And so it'll sunset back to about $5.5 million per person, or $11 million per couple, plus the inflation rider. And most people think that'll put it in the $7 to $7.5 million area. So it'll go up to like $14 or $15 million. Okay. Instead of being $26 to $28 million, it'll be $14, $15 million. That's going to clip some more people. Some more people having a state tax problem. So a lot of people are looking with financial planners and advisors and stuff like that to figure out how they're going to deal with that. Capital gains. I already talked about that. It's taxes income in the bracket you're in. Remember, I talked about my land sale and if my capital gains, what that would be. I already talked about that. So I'm going to go on. Inheritance tax. It changed as of the first of the year, about a month ago, 2 months ago now. And right now, in Nebraska is one of only 4 states that has an inheritance tax. And if you receive something from your parents, it's a direct relative, or from your grandparents as a direct relative, then it's a 1% tax on anything over 100,000. If you're giving it to a couple, then it's 200,000, 100 for each person. So anything over 100,000 would be taxed at 1%. If I'm giving it to a non-direct relative, like a niece or a nephew, then 40,000 exempted, or 80,000 per couple, and then it's 11% tax. And if I'm giving it to a non-relative, I could give my farm to Randy, for instance. And if I gave my farm to Randy, then he'd have a $25,000 exemption, and he'd have to pay a 15% tax on everything else over that 25,000 of what I would gift, what he would inherit. In other words, what he inherits upon my death. So that's how those 3 taxes work. If you got questions, we'll catch them here in a second. Just know that the capital, I already talked about the capital gains tax and how that switches and how it goes up or down, and gifts won't change the amount of capital gains you have to pay. I already covered that. And I already talked about that land joints. Okay, so here, be careful about how you own the ground. I already talked about most of this, but sole proprietorship means I own it by myself, or I can have joint tenancy with right or survivorship. That's very typical with couples. Watch out for divorces and remarriage issues. And what I mean by that is, if I divorce my wife and I don't go back to the land title and change it from her name to my new wife's name or to my children's name, then the new wife could get half the ground. So with right or survivorship, if I passed away, if I don't change it, the old wife would still get half the ground. Okay. So make sure that we change it when we have the divorces and remarriage. And then land owned tenants in common, one party can force the sale. I talked about that already. Okay. I started a program called LandLink here 2 years ago, and I'm trying to match land seekers that don't have access to ground, that don't have money, they can't buy ground, there's not ground in their family. I'm trying to match them up with land owners that have ground and would like to see it continue as its own operation. They want to bring somebody back to start with their operation. They don't have anybody coming, they want to start somebody. So I started LandLink to help with that, and we're trying to get, we have applications online for both groups, and we can, do all that. And to make an application, you get to, hang on, what am I doing? cap.unl.edu, look for LandLink, and it's done online. If you got questions, make sure you contact me. You got a month to do that. Otherwise, it'll go to Jessica. Jessica's helping me kind of put this on. Right now, my situation is I have about 165, 170 land seekers. I only have about 7 or 8 land owners. Okay. So if we have somebody that wants to farm bad, they should apply as a land seeker, however, because I got a guy by Litchfield along Highway 2 there that's looking for somebody, and you can't get, right now, he's having a bad time getting somebody to come and work for him out in the middle of nowhere there, because he's 40 miles from Grand Island, 40 miles from Kearney, 40 miles from Broken Bow. So he feels like people don't want to live there because it's too far away from anything that they would need, that they would really need, medical help, for instance. But anyway, cap.unl.edu, look for LandLink, and I'd be happy to talk with anybody about that. I've had conversation with people before they make the application. What else do I got here? There's also a rural response line. I want to make sure we get that covered. If you got questions, about any of these things, and you want to get started again. Let's say you hit that circle of inaction, can't figure out where to start. I've already retired. Call the rural response line, get an appointment. Joe or Dave, or get on to Joe and Dave's clinic. Joe Hawbaker, H-A-W Baker. Hawbaker is the best ag attorney in the state, in my view. And Dave Gaylor has been working with him for years, since the 80s, since the farm crisis, on how to work with people and get your questions answered about what happens next. And so if you get stuck somewhere along the way, call them, have them call you, get on a clinic schedule, do something. You can have a Zoom with them, and they'll get you going again. They'll get you started. They have monthly clinics across the state. And then also know that if you rent to a beginning farmer, if I'm a landowner and I rent to a beginning farmer, and they have less than, I think it's $200,000 or $300,000 worth of assets, and I give them a multi-year lease, I can get a beginning farmer tax credit on my income tax as the landowner, and it's a part of that it's called that Next Gen program. And you call that number at the Department of Ag here in Lincoln, and they can get you hooked up with how to get that application in. That application is due by November 1st, I think, each year. So right now we're not in an application time, but we will be again this fall. So look that up. You can look up with Next Gen with the Department of Ag, or you can call that number and get some help there if you'd like to try and get hooked up with that deal. It actually gives the landowner a nice tax break on their Nebraska income taxes. Randy, that's all I've got. I'm ready to answer questions now. I don't think there's anything in the chat. Let's see. We'll just go like this. And people can either ask a question. We'll unmute. You can unmute and ask a question, or you can type in the chat or type it wherever you would like to put it. And I'll be glad to help here for a minute or two, if I can help.
So define beginning farmer.
For what purposes?
What the next,
For the Next Gen program?
how long do they have to be?
Oh, well, I think it's 10. I think the beginning farmer for the Next Gen program is less than 10 years of Schedule Fs and less than $250,000 or $300,000 worth of assets. If you go to that website, you can look that up. Randy can look that up for you. Just pull up that Next Gen program on the assets, and you can look up that definition, the exact definition. Or I can do it quick, maybe here. But anyway, could keep going. What? Somebody's put something in the chat. Your book or two you can recommend that addresses these important topics. Any other books or news? I don't know that I have anything that I refer to as a book. Joe Hawbaker has a website. The attorney that I talked about a minute ago, he has a website that you could probably go and look up a whole bunch of stuff and read more about what I've been talking about. And I'll look up that address for you right now. Hang on, let me find that. I just saw it this morning, so I should be able to get this done pretty quickly. I should be able to find this fairly quickly. Where'd that website go? Spots online. I thought I saw it here. Hang on. And yeah, go ahead and ask more questions right now if you want to, and I'll get to them in a second. Let's go on with this just for a second. Hang on.
I have a quick question. Does the beginning farmer Next Gen, does that apply to family as well?
Yes, it can. It can apply to a son or daughter. Absolutely.
Okay.
Make sure you follow their rules. That's why you probably should call them up and make sure you visit with them so you get started the right way to make sure that you get that put together properly. You don't follow them going with that. Just make sure you do it right and you'll be fine. Okay, hang on. I figured out where I got to go. I got to go over here, maybe. Shoot. That's not what I'm looking for. That's my website. All right, hang on. How come I can't find that? I just saw it this morning. Joe Hawbaker did a whole bunch of, here we go, hang on. I think I finally got lucky here. Farm legal services, farm answers, beginning, estate, here we go. Estate planning articles. Okay, here we go. All right, so I'm going to share my screen again. And I'm going to share this screen right here, share. And I think you can see that it's farmerandrancher.org, and then look for articles, estate planning articles. And here's all the articles he has. I think you see that, correct? No? Do you see that? Okay. Farmerandrancher.org. Okay. Oh. It. Oh, bummer. Are you still there? I lost everybody. Hang on. Let's look at all I was trying to say is that farmerandrancher.org, farmer and rancher, all one word, .org, look for the articles. And that's what Joe was trying to send us. Joe sent a nice series of articles there. Okay. All right. I don't know what happened there. We crashed there for a second. What else have I got in the chat? TL, thank you. Yeah, you found it, TL. Good for you. Thank you. That's outstanding. You sent that to everyone? Good. You sent it to everyone. Very good. Nice set of articles there. Okay, any other questions? I lost some people, but hopefully you came back with me. I apologize for that. I don't know what happened. I didn't do anything wrong. I don't think I did anything wrong, but I lost people there for a second.
Good afternoon. Sure enjoyed your presentation this afternoon. Very informative. I think we're probably the only family that's going to pass on a little bit of inheritance, but I'm not sure if that inheritance is more than the debt. But how do you structure that going on, passing the debt load ahead? And we're tangled up on that, I guess.
Well, as you work through something like that, you got to make sure your tax advisor is an integral part of that thing, and have a lawyer as an integral part of that thing. And then there's ways of getting that done that's going to take more than what I can provide, because it's a legal issue. It's a whole bunch of other issues. That certified farm transition coordinator person is something really worth considering in that situation, because they have some other tools or thoughts. They're smarter than I am to figure that all out. And I don't know, where are you guys at? Are you the folks that are in Illinois or Indiana?
No, we're in North Platte.
Oh, you're in North Platte. Okay, no problem. So there's a guy. So there's a guy that runs the state. His name is Brandon Dirk Snyder. He's a certified farm transition coordinator, and he does a nice job of trying to help people through situations like that, so they can get that debt load put into a place, or put into a way that it could be handled and taken care of, yet we try and take care of the family too. I mean, that's the issue, right? We got to be able to do both things. And so
that's the biggest issue, taking care of the generation that's going to retire, maybe someday going to the rest home, taking care of the family that's home at the farm. You know, it's all very manageable. It's just which one, or how do you pass that on?
Yeah. So you consider talking with somebody that's a financial planner, or just find somebody that's not a mediator, but because I think you're getting along fine. I think it's a function of trying to find someone that could help you get that. Well, a good ag loan officer would help you with some of that too, as far as that goes, in terms of helping you figure out how to distribute that debt. And it might be a function of reorganizing the debt, throwing it more long-term or something like that, so that the succeeding generation can handle the debt. We're trying to reduce the payments. However, the downside of that right now is your interest rates are higher. So I understand there's an issue with that too. Used to, for years and years, we could say, we don't need to worry about that. I don't have a great solution for you, but you need to talk to, by the way, that rural response hotline number I gave you, Dave Gaylor is a financial dollar whiz, and Joe can help too. Just don't be afraid to call them. They come to North Platte.
Thank you.
What else? What other questions? I'm gonna stop the recording. And we're gonna go.